Hello, I'm Roger Mark de Souza. I'm a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and I've had a wonderful experience of directing the center's Maternal Health Initiative and work. 5 years, it seems just a year ago, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to discuss today some of the issues that the Maternal Health Initiative at the Woodrow Wilson Center deals with for the Caribbean Basin, in particular with Senator Edwards from Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Welcome. It's
Thank
great to have you
so
here.
very much. It's indeed my pleasure to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Nikoli Edwards from Trinidad and Tobago, San Fernando, to be specific. And I have been largely involved in youth advocacy work, so youth development work back in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is what really allowed me into the political sphere when in 2017, President Anthony Carmona would have called upon me to serve in the Senate. And the first piece of legislation that I had the opportunity to speak on as an independent senator had to do with the Marriages Act, ending child marriages in Trinidad and Tobago. And then from there, it's a lot of involvement in terms of comprehensive sexuality education, health and family life education, and topics surrounding that. So I've been very much involved in piecing together the puzzle parts when it comes to how do we develop the holistic young person.
Wow, so you've done quite a bit in a short period of time.
Yes.
So for those people who are listening to us who are not very familiar with Trinidad and Tobago, just situate the country for us.
Sure.
So folks have a sense of where we're talking about.
Sure. So it is just on the coast of Venezuela. So when you're thinking South America, just there. And it's right under the hurricane belt. So one of the things people think when it comes to the Caribbean, we do in fact have issues when it comes to climate change. Well, luckily, Trinidad and Tobago has been avoiding a lot of the natural disasters taking place in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, recently we've seen some devastating effects of climate change and how that has affected our country as a whole. But Trinidad and Tobago, nonetheless, a lovely place. You need to visit for Carnival. I say this to everyone.
Yes.
And it's just such a rich, diverse country where you have the influence from major metropoles from around the world coming together, bringing that influence and a truly lovely melting pot.
So Trinidad is so well known for its ethnic diversity.
Yes.
And you talk about the action that you have taken on youth health issues. You talk about the Marriage Act. How difficult it is to make progress on issues like this when you're dealing with a population that is so diverse, different religious beliefs.
Sure.
How does that play out? Well, very often these questions are tied to very personal beliefs.
Well, it must be very difficult if you're using the same tactics to deal with evolving issues. And I think that's where the problem lies. Far too often we use some of the same traditional methods to deal with problems that have evolved far beyond what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so it's about understanding the differences and exploiting those differences to the best of our ability, because we must find some common ground at the end of the day. So when we're dealing with issues such as adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health, we have to understand that the young person of today is not the young person of yesterday. And as such, they are more well connected. They are now seeing so many opportunities and they speak a different language. What remains is many of the same experiences that young persons of yesterday would probably have today, but nonetheless things are changing. So we do have religious organizations, and we always think of religious organizations as being anti this and anti that. I think when we even look at the Pope now, we're seeing differences. So the world is changing, and so too are the issues evolving.
And so you talk about a little bit of this intergenerational shift.
Yes.
In terms of experience, exposure, beliefs, understanding, appreciation. Is there a lot of resistance from parents when you talk about these issues in a Caribbean context?
I don't think so. I think that we are really polarizing the issue when it comes to parents and their ability to process information and be willing to accept change. We're seeing a lot of parents, because even now you're seeing parents or persons parenting children at younger and younger ages in some cases. So they are not distant from the issues or the challenges of the young persons. So I do think that in today's world, we're seeing parents accepting, parents being willing to take part in some of the discussions because they too want to educate themselves. It's about parents. In the past, you would have had a situation where parents, because they were not versed on a particular issue, they will speak a particular way. But I think parents are more accepting and more open-minded for their edification and also for that of their children.
So it seems to me that parents are getting more educated. Young people are mobilizing themselves.
Yes.
They're better informed. What are some of the challenges that young people in Trinidad and Tobago still face on these issues of health, sexuality, and reproduction?
So I think the biggest issue is that young people are not being allowed into the spaces that they need to voice their concerns and their issues. So we constantly have these meetings taking place on the inside while young people are locked outside. And this is something that we need to change. And it cannot be a situation of tokenism, because that is a very real issue where you're bringing young persons to the table, but just for bringing them to the table's sake. You need to ensure that their voice resonates. You need to give them the same amount of time as you would give someone who is a director or who has that technical experience, because young people are the best experts on their future and their experiences. So it's about real youth engagement. And for as long as we have persons in position who are not open-minded to young people and their views, because it might not be politically attractive or it may not score them more points politically, we will constantly have that they and us,
Right.
and that scenario, and it needs to change.
And when you say young person, how do you define a young person? From what age?
So I would have normally gone with the Commonwealth, because I had been so heavily entrenched in the Commonwealth, and that would have been 15 to 29. But in Trinidad and Tobago, youth is defined as being between the ages of 12 and 29.
12 to 29.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've traveled to many other parts of the world. So for instance, in Africa, youth goes up to 35 in some cases and 40 in other places.
Really?
Yeah. So
some old young people.
Some old young people.
Yeah. Okay.
But you have those kinds of issues as well, of persons not understanding what youth means. And when you don't understand what youth means, thereby you don't understand what youth development means. And when you don't understand what youth development means, you can't see it in the context of national development. So we need to start sensitizing persons to what is youth and why is youth important.
So you talk about young Caribbean people being closed out from these meetings. So what are the opportunities for youth leadership in the region?
I really think it's a matter of teaching persons. So you set the platform for capacity building and development, and you train young people to go out there and train other young people. So a trainer situation. That is one of the best opportunities that you can really leverage. The education system as well. You need to open up the education system so that it's not simply or purely about academics, but rather the holistic development of young people. So one of the organizations that I work with is We Schools. It's based in Canada, but they have influence in the United States and in many other parts of the world. And I am a motivational speaker and facilitator with them. So it allows me to go into schools and speak to students about volunteering, advocacy, how to build campaigns. And I think once I've gotten their ear, the children that is, then I can start introducing other issues and concerns that they may become passionate about.
And this is at the secondary school level?
And the primary school as well.
And primary school.
Because the primary school student of today is not the primary school student of yesterday. Young people today from the primary school level go up are more in tune. They're using their tablets and their smartphones. From 7, you are seeing children with smartphones. So we need to not hide that from them, but show them how to use it effectively.
So I'm quite intrigued by your personal journey.
Sure.
You're a young senator. You're working on these issues. You see them as being important and critical to overall development and well-being of young people and of your country.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how you came to be in the position that you are in now as a senator.
Sure. Well, I would start with my exposure. Back in 2009, I would have been able to attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government government meetings youth forum. So Trinidad and Tobago hosted the CHUGM back in 2009, and that was my first exposure to youth development work. The sad thing is that coming off of that experience, there were no real opportunities for me to get involved in locally. So my advocacy efforts and my willingness to become a youth advocate had gone dormant until I entered into university. So the University of the West Indies.
Right.
I sat on the Guild of Students in 3 different positions, and that really built within me the leadership capability and capacity. But in 2015, my father, he was on remand in the Port of Spain prison, and there was a prison break, and he escaped from the Royal Jail. And 2 days later, they found his body bullet riddled, and that was his demise. And there was a time where I felt as though it was my darkest moment. But I asked myself the question, how can I make something positive out of this? And I started to look at a reformation of the criminal justice system, because had he been exposed to a system or an environment that provided alternative dispute resolution, then his demise may not have been the way it was. And I started to press those issues, and thankfully the president was a supporter of the work, President Anthony Carmona then of Trinidad and Tobago, and he was the one who called upon me and frequently engaged in me and gave me support. And I think therein lies the answer to a lot of our problems. You need to have someone who can lend that support in positions of authority and influence. And because when you invest in young people, you're not just investing or putting opportunities for one young person, but rather for a generation.
Right.
So
I love that. You're putting opportunities for a generation.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems to me that you have also engaged with UN agencies such as the UN Population Fund,
Yes.
UNFPA. Talk a little bit about your involvement with UNFPA.
So since 2016, I have been involved with the Youth Advisory Group, and then I was elected co-chair of the Youth Advisory Group in Trinidad and Tobago. And that has really exposed me to so much work when it comes to comprehensive sexuality education and things relative to populations. And it allowed me the opportunity to operate not just as at a local and regional level, but last year I was able to go to Oslo, Norway, where I was able to present on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago a profile of what comprehensive sexuality education looks like. And these are the opportunities that I think young people need to be exposed to. And the UNFPA has really given me that platform. But dare I say, it's one thing to give a young person an opportunity, but it's another thing to teach or train that young person to capture further opportunities, because that would make the difference. Not everyone is able to understand what to do with an opportunity when it comes their way. So we need to be spending a lot more time developing the holistic young person.
So I have an opportunity to send your way. As you're aware, I'm the president and CEO of Sister Cities International, which is the oldest and largest citizen diplomacy movement in the world. It's set up by President Eisenhower. And being from the Caribbean, like you, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, I'm looking to expand and build opportunities through youth leadership and Sister Cities International in the Caribbean. What would you see as some obvious opportunities for an organization like Sister Cities International to do to promote youth leadership so that young people in the Caribbean are taking advantage of those opportunities, not just at one moment in time, but for a lifetime?
Sure. I think we definitely need institutional strengthening. And through exchanges and stuff, you get exposure. But as I said before, what do you do with that exposure? How do you harness it? How do you leverage it? And I think one of the things in the Caribbean especially, it's not a matter of young people are not connected. Young people are not aware of what are some of the things taking place around them and externally. But what can I do within my space to agitate change, to bring about further opportunities? And I think capacity building is a key exercise that needs to be undertaken. We need to be able to sensitize institutions that think I must only invest as part of my corporate social responsibility into things such as sports and arts and culture. It goes beyond that to capacity building. If you want a young person to go outside of the country, get experience, come back home, how do they now reassimilate into that culture and pass on that information? So I think young people, the vibrancy is there, the willingness is there, but we need the guidance more than anything. So leveraging on experiences externally, bringing that to the Caribbean, and especially helping with strong professionalization of the youth sector, because you can't have groups organizing, just meeting at the side of the road or just in a cafe. There needs to be some structure so that they can start to capitalize on grant funding opportunities outside. So once you get that kind of a roadmap, or these are the checklists that a good functioning youth organization needs to have, getting that kind of support and guidance, I think it will go leaps and bounds beyond what you ever thought was possible.
Excellent ideas. You better watch out. I may be calling on you as a consultant,
Not a
an
problem.
advisor. Well, Senator Edwards, it's wonderful to have you in Washington, D.C. Welcome. Congratulations on your appointment. And thank you for your service and for your good work. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we continue to keep in touch.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.